to our country, and it means a lot, obviously. In the meantime, let's get started here. Let's put this in the background. Okay, welcome. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day, and it's always nice to learn together. And so what I would like to do today before we get started is just some housekeeping notes, which is tomorrow night we've got a great scholar in residence featuring Shammai Grossman and his wife Sharon. And we were just talking about that a few minutes ago. We'll be talking about the vaccine and Jewish perspective. So very timely given this week's news. And also, I think, very interesting for us as a community to be able to see Shammai, a little more grown up. Well, I mean, he's been grown up for a while, but it's always nice to bring them back home and hear from them. We love them, and it's going to be great. So it's tomorrow night, I believe, at 7 p.m. Okay, I wanna spend some time today talking about what is the responsibility that parents owe their children. In other words, what must a parent do for a child? And in particular, I want to look at that through the lens of this week's Parsha, which we know describes Avraham trying to find a wife for his son Yitzchak, and to get a better understanding of what we can take away for our own lives when it comes to this. So with that, let me share my screen. Let me just ask the question. What do you think? What are some of the basic responsibilities that a parent has towards a child? What should a parent, what are things a parent must do for a child?
Feed them.
Keep them safe.
Keep them safe, feed them. What else?
Educate them.
Jewish education.
Okay, is that a requirement? I mean, do you think that's a requirement? Is that something that it's an obligation to do that? In fact, let me actually give you some extra tools to think about this. Let's just share my screen here. In our very first box over here, we say this every single day: Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, right? And the very first paragraph: that should be on your hearts, all the things that God commands us. But verse 7, verse 7, you shall teach them diligently unto your children and talk of them when they are sitting in your house. So what are we supposed to instruct our children in? How are we supposed to do that? How would you define teaching your children diligently? What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to give them?
Set an example.
Communicate with them the values that we have and help them to understand how to continue them.
Okay. Can you be more specific?
Halacha?
Yeah. Set an example for them.
Bernard, so what does it mean to set an example for your kids? Like, what is? Give me something.
To do the right things, and so they can see that you did the right thing.
Right.
You know, like tzedakah. If they don't know you're giving tzedakah, they don't know it's the right thing, even though you can tell them. But if you go through and follow a lot of those things, then I think you're doing all. You can't make them. I can tell you that. You can't make them do stuff, but if they see you doing it, they may be encouraged to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's good. That's good wisdom. I'm gonna write that one down. You can't make them. I wish I could get that number.
You can teach them to be independent, and no matter what you have them learn and do and this, that, and the other, you should make them independent with an independent mind. So when they become adults, they can seek knowledge and they can seek a path without you. They can stand on their own 2 feet and do the things that they're supposed to do and do them with honor and diligence.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. Now, I want to show you a very famous Gemara in Kiddushin that takes some of these ideas that you're talking about and actually puts them into specific words. And tell me what you think about this. So the Gemara in Kiddushin teaches us that ha'av chayav bivno, a father is obligated in their son to do there are certain things that we owe our children. For instance, lamulo, you have to circumcise your son. Livdoto, if it's applicable, you need to do a pidyon haben. You have to redeem them from the Kohen. Lolamdo Torah, and you have to teach them Torah. Lasio Isha, and help them find a wife. Lolamdo umaniot, and teach them a trade. V'yeshomrim av lehashito b'mayim, and others suggest to teach them how to swim as well. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kol she'eino melamed et beno umanot melamdo listut. Anyone doesn't teach their child a trade, it's as if they taught them thievery. What do you think about this Gemara in Kiddushin? Is there anything that's surprising on the list? Do you agree with this list? Do you disagree with this list? What do you think? Again, to recap, Brit Milah, Pidyon Haben, teaching a child Torah, marrying off your children, teaching them a trade, and teaching them how to swim. What's the significance of these things?
The teaching them how to swim seems out of place.
Okay, teach them. Why is that so important, teaching your kid how to swim?
It's
Well,
for
you know,
safety.
Okay, I could think of other safety things also, by the way. Teach your
Seems out of
child to
place.
look both ways before they cross the street.
Yeah, if you lived in Arizona, there's in the desert, you know, why would you need to teach them how to swim? Exactly.
Or alternatively, teach them, not to take candy from strangers. Why is that on this list here? What do you think?
Do they mean swim literally?
I don't know. What do you think?
I think it may be a metaphor for something else.
Might be for
Because
survival.
swimming is not necessarily swimming in water. You learn how to swim in society, how to swim in different things. Swim may be just maybe a poor word for conducting yourself and learning how to manage yourself. And they may not mean swimming in water, it means swimming in society.
That could be. I don't disagree. I don't think it's not 100% clear to me. What about the other traits? Teaching, your child a trade. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Sure. So they can stand on their own. They can be successful in society and support themselves and their family.
Okay. So
What about the guys that are raised to just study?
Robin always has a good question. Good question. So, that is their trade. Maybe their trade is to be a teacher of Torah. Being a Torah teacher is a trade, right? Especially, a few generations, not so long ago, a few generations ago, being a teacher, a rabbi, would travel from city to city to help teach Torah. They didn't have books and Zoom and web apps and the internet or books. You can't see the books, I just realized. I just pointed to them. But didn't have things the way we have now. So teaching Torah, you could argue it's a trade, and also teaching your child Torah, you can kill two birds with one stone, certainly. But let's come back to the swimming idea for a moment. Look how...
I was going to say, getting back to swimming, water, Torah is described as, Torah is described as water, and we could be immersed in Torah, but if we don't know how to swim, we could also drown in our Torah.
Interesting. Okay, I like that metaphor. Yeah. So you have to teach your child Torah, but teach them in a way to stay afloat, metaphorically. Yeah, I like that. The Rambam actually codifies this in his commentary on the Mishnah. He writes, "Mitzvah haben al ha'av sheish mitzvot ve'eluhen." So there's 6 duties that a father has to do for his son. Exactly like we said: lamolo, fedoto, lamdo Torah, lasio isha, lamdo umanot, benar. So these are the 6 things. Again, circumcision, pidyon haben, teaching them Torah, marrying him off to a wife, teaching him a trade, and teaching him how to swim. And he continues in English, a father is required to do each of these things, but interestingly, a woman is not required to teach them to her daughter, for this is one of those things that fall into the category of quote unquote men are obligated and women are exempted from. So I don't want to get too far sidetracked about where this obligation falls, but I just want to at least show it to you in full intellectual honesty that the Gemara, if you look back over here, said it very explicitly, a father to their sons. The question is, do you need to teach your daughter how to swim? Do you need to teach your daughter Torah? Are those requirements? Are they not requirements? And is this a mitzvah only from the father, or does the mother have the same obligation? So a lot more to talk about in that regard, but I want to shift our conversation and root it more in this week's Parsha. Let's think about our Parsha for a moment. Of the 6 things that we just discussed, how many of those does Avraham do for his son Yitzchak? Well, let's count. He gives him a Brit Milah. Pidyon Haben, well, there was no Kohen, so that one doesn't count, let's say. He certainly teaches him Torah. That has to have happened because otherwise Yitzchak wouldn't be able to stand on his own 2 feet. He teaches, I would argue, he even teaches Yitzchak a trade. What is Avraham's trade, if you will? He's a proselytizer. I don't know what the right term for that is, but he's a man who shares the word of God. He's like we just said, a person who goes from city to city. That's Yitzchak picks up exactly where Avraham starts. So he teaches them a trade. And what does he spend the bulk of this week's Parsha doing? The whole Parsha is an extraordinarily long and detailed, and Nechama Leibovitz has an incredible article about why it's so detailed, our Parsha, about the conversations, and Avram sends Eliezer, and where does he send him, and who does he want him to find, and finding from his family versus finding from a wife from the daughters of from his family versus Canaan. It's an incredible article. And it's very, very wordy. There's a lot going on there. But we see an entire parsha dedicated to Avram doing exactly that. He marries off his son. He makes sure his son has a wife. But the only thing that we see that he does not seem to do is teach his son how to swim. So once again, we find that there's this weird, why do you teach your child to swim? What a weird thing to say. Why is that one of the important values? And if you look at it, Avram actually does every single one of these. And how does it make sense for the last one? So what I want to do is to actually look at the text and see what stands out to us. So I want to take you actually to the end of the Parsha. Let's take a look over here, the end of the Parsha, chapter 25. So Vayosef Avraham, Vaikach Isha Ushma Torah. So what happens at the end of our Parsha? So we know the beginning of the Parsha involves the death of Sarah. She passes away. And then the middle of the Parsha is finding a wife for Yitzchak and Rivka, who comes into the picture, really becomes like Sarah 2.0. She enters into the tent of Sarah, and the Medrash talks about how the challah was fresh and the Shabbos candles were lit, and she literally just takes over for Sarah. And at the end, though, we find that sure enough, Avram finds additional companionship later in life. He finds a woman by the name of Keturah. Now, who was Keturah? Does anyone want to take a gander? So the Medrash teaches that Keturah was Hagar, that if you remember the very same Hagar that Avram sent away, he ends up bringing back later, and they rekindle the relationship and after Sarah's death. But what's interesting is it's not just that Avram finds companionship later in life, but rather he actually has additional children. Vatelo et Zimran, vet Yakshan, vet Medan, vet Midjan, vet Yishbak, vet Shuach, V'yakshan yalat et Shva, v'dedan, u'v'dedan hayu asherim, v'tushim, u'le'umim. Uvnei Midjan, Efa, v'Efer, v'Chanoch, v'Avida, v'Elada, kol el b'nei Keturah. So Keturah has all these children and grandchildren. So this actually helps us in a sense. If you wanted to know, one of the promises that Avram is made by God is that he will be made into many nations. So here you go. The Torah is showing us exactly how this happens. It's not just that there's Yishmael and Yitzchak who take up after Avram's cause and are the nations that come from him, but rather Keturah has children as well, Midjan being one of them. So everyone, like we talk about the Abrahamic Accords, like all these religious entities all really come directly from Avraham. But something interesting happens in verse number 5. So at the end of your life, you have a will. You wanna set up your family. You wanna pass on heritage and inheritance to your children. So what happens in verse 5? Vayitain Avraham et kol asher lo liyitzchak. Avraham gives everything that he has to his son Isaac. Livnei apilagshim in verse 6. Asher l'Avram natan Avram matanot. But he gave to his the children of the Pilagesh, meaning Keturah's children. He gave them matanot. He gave them gifts, vayishalchem. He sent them away. Me'al Yitzchak beno boden ochai kidmal eretz kedem. He sent them to the land of the east, away from Yitzchak. I think a few years ago we spent some time analyzing where he sent them and why he sent them there. And then the Torah continues towards the end of our parsha. Ve'eli me'shnei chayei Avram asher chai me'at shana v'shivim shana v'chamesh shanim. Avram was living 175 years. Vayigva vayamat Avraham b'seva tova. Zaken v'sava v'yasef el amav. He dies at a ripe old age, and he was gathered to his people. And look who buries him by Kuroto Yitzchak Vishmael. It's not the children of Keturah who bury him because they've already been sent away. But Yishmael and Yitzchak come together, even though they had disagreements in the past. They were able to come together to bury their father in Marat HaMachpelah, the very cave that he bought from Ephron ben Sochar Achiti Asher Pnei Mamre, that he bought at the beginning of our Parsha. Now, let's look back, though, to verses 5 and 6. Is anyone bothered by anything in verse 5 and 6? If you gave everything to Yitzchak, everything, kol asher lo le Yitzchak, if everything you owned you gave to Isaac in verse 5, what did he give the sons of the concubines in verse number 6? What was left to give? Does everyone understand the question?
Mhm.
If you've given everything and there's nothing else to give, so what's left to give now to what are these presents? And by the way, since why do we even care that he gave presents to these other children? Why is that relevant? Every time I leave my grandma's house and she gives me a dollar bill, I don't record that in the Torah about that, right? So why who cares about these details? Okay, I'm sure that Avraham gave many gifts to many people over many years. Why does the Torah tell us that he gave matanot, that he gave these gifts towards these sons of the concubines, his children from Keturah? Why does it tell us that? And more than that, what are those gifts? So Rashi actually tells us, take a look at Rashi in box number 5. Natan Avraham matanot, Hirsch Rabbeinu, the rabbis teach, Shem Tum'ah Masar Lahem. He transmitted to them the names of impure things. Shem Tum'ah. What does that mean? That he gave them Shem Tum'ah. He gave them the names of impure things. And why is that something that he would want to actually give? Why is it something he would actually want to give to these children? Why is that significant? Why is that the going away present before they go off to the land in the east? What do y'all think?
Is that like giving the forbidden fruit?
I mean, I don't think it's a fruit here. This is again, it says the name of impurity. What does that mean? I don't know. What is it?
Just metaphorically, the knowledge of good and evil.
Maybe, could be. It's a strange thing for the Torah to tell us this. So again, let's recap our questions. 1, why do we even care that he gave them any gifts at all? The second question that we want to ask ourselves is, what did he give them? He had nothing left to give. He'd given everything to Isaac. There was nothing left. There's no property left to give, no finances, nothing left over. And finally, what does it mean when Rashi says that the gift that he gave them was Shem Tumah, that it was this name of impurity? And so I want to answer this question by looking at a Zohar. I hope that's okay. I'm under 40, but I think others might be over 40, so it'll be okay to study it with you. So when we talk about...
Can I suggest something, maybe?
Yeah, please.
Hagar was very different than a very different person, and therefore, came from she was, I would call her wicked, or she was just very, she wasn't a saint, let's say, and her children were likewise like that. And I think that we see that based on that.
Okay, that. So what are you suggesting?
The other thing I'm suggesting is that, that he's trying to warn them about these wickedness that they might have a propensity for.
I don't disagree with you that he might be trying to set the stage, but the Torah is very explicit. He gives them a gift. A gift is usually not something that's a bad thing. A gift is usually a nice thing. And Rashi here is telling us that it's Shem Tum'ah, the names of impure things. So they would know the things that were pure and impure. Okay, like what? Why is that a nice gift? What is that? What's the significance of that? So what I
Well,
want
to protect them
okay.
against.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. That's true. So let's look at the Zohar for a second. So in Shemot, we find in chapter 6 of Shemot, we find the very first moment where God says that you will know that I am God, right? You shall know that I'm the Lord your God. And so the Zohar writes, I'll just, instead of reading in the Aramaic, I'll read it in the English. This commandment is the first of all commandments to know of God in general, i.e. to know that there is a supreme ruler who controls the world and creates all the worlds. This is to know of God in general, but the final commandment is to know God in a more specific manner. In other words, let's say outside what the Zohar is really trying to say inside. What the Zohar is saying here is that there are really two different levels when it comes to knowledge and understanding God or even relationships with God. There is general knowledge and there is specific knowledge. What do we mean by general knowledge? So general knowledge, for instance, is the initial understanding of how the world works, that the world has a God in it. Who was the first person who really understood that God existed in that way? In like, not the first person, but who really pushes this idea that there could be a singular entity in ethical monotheism? It's Avraham. What's the famous story with Avraham? Take a look in the Medrash. We saw this just a few weeks back. The Midrash right over here in Breshit Rabbah talks about the whole incident where he gets thrown into the Kivshan Ha'esh, where he gets thrown into the furnace of fire, where Nimrod is talking to him. And notice the conversation that he has with Nimrod. So here we go. Avram, so they seized him and took him to Nimrod. So it says, "Let us worship fire," Nimrod said. "Let us rather worship water, which quenches fire," Avram said. "Let us worship water," Nimrod then says. So Avram responds, "Let us rather worship the clouds, which bear the water." And then, "Let us then worship the clouds," Nimrod says. "And let us worship the wind, which disperses the clouds," etc., etc. In other words, what are they focusing on? What is Avram initially focusing on in this conversation when he's trying to share this idea that God exists? He's focusing on the natural parts of the world. Anyone who walks around the world and is looking to see God's presence, you'll see it. Look at the trees, how they change. Look at the system of the universe. Look at the birds and the sky and the sun. It just, when you see the natural order of things and you study nature, so you understand that there's a supreme leader. You have an understanding of this generality, a general knowledge, like the Zohar says, of that. However, Avraham actually comes to accept beyond that. He doesn't just stop at general knowledge. And how do you know that he doesn't just understand God to be a supreme being, rather understands God in a deeper way? So at the beginning of Parshat Lech Lecha, notice what happens. God tells him, "Vayomer Hashem el Avram," box 8, "Lech lecha me'aretzecha u'mo'adzecha me'beit avicha el ha'aretz asher arecha." I want you to leave. I want you to go for yourself. And I want you to leave your father's house and your native land, etc. And what are the promises that God makes? I'm going to make you into a great nation. I will bless you, and I'll make your name great, and then you shall be a blessing. So Rashi tells us in box 9, what's the significance of these particular brachos? So since traveling is the cause of three things, it decreases and breaks up family life. Some interpret this Rashi to mean that if you travel, it can lead to infertility. It also reduces one's wealth and lessens one renown, meaning you're not going to be as famous. So therefore, Avram needed these extra three blessings. So God promised him children, wealth, and a great name. That's exactly what he's promised. And so God raises Avram beyond the confines of nature and places Avraham in God's own immediate domain. This, by the way, is what I think we mean when we say lech lecha, meaning go for yourself. I want you to leave the natural order of things, and I want you to go to a different personal space, the personal space where you have a direct relationship with God, where I, as God, I'm going to go give you special blessings. It's in this moment that Avram goes, again, using the language of the Zohar, from the general knowledge that there is a supreme being to the more specific knowledge, to the intimate relationship that he has with God. And he receives blessings because of it. So general and goes to much more specific. Now, later we find that Avraham is blessed And he has this beautiful relationship, and he receives many other blessings from God. And one of them comes in chapter 24. Look in this pasuk. Avraham zaken ba bayamim, v'Hashem berach et Avraham bakol. Avram was old and he was advanced in years, and the Lord blessed him bakol, in all things. What does it mean that he was blessed in all things? What does that actually mean? It could mean that he just had a perfect life, right? That's what it could mean. So Rashi says, this is kind of neat, the word bakol, highlighted over here, that word, if you take the gematria, the numerical value, bakol ola begematria ben, the numerical value of the word bakol equals that of son. So when it says that God blessed Avraham, it wasn't just these initial blessings from Lech Lecha of having wealth and a great name, or just children in general. Rather, very specifically, he was blessed with a son. And a son meant more to Avraham than anything else. But the Ramban has an incredible interpretation. It's so incredible that Art Scroll, in its translation, in the English translation of the Ramban, did not translate parts of it because it's a little bit deep and hard to understand. But this is an advanced group, so I'm going to learn it with you anyways. So first, the Ramban, what he does is he actually teaches another interpretation. He quotes a midrash, which says, I'm going to go back to this verse over here. It'll be easier to say it outside. Avraham zaken ba bayamim. Avram was getting on in years. V'Hashem berach et Avram, and God blessed Avram. Bakol. So the midrash suggests that Bakol was the name of his daughter. Avram had a daughter named Bakol. That was her name. God blessed him, not in all things. God blessed Abraham with Kol, Bakol, with a child named Kol or Bakol. That's what the daughter's name was. And this way he literally had everything. He had a son and he had a daughter, and he was quote unquote complete in that way. That's what the Ramban quotes the midrash. However, well, before I continue, what do you think about that? That Avraham had a daughter named Bakol. A stretch. Okay, but you can see it, the reading in the text. I think you can see, right? God blessed Avraham with what? With Kol. What does that mean, Kol? Everything. Well, why does the Torah tell us that he has everything? The Torah is telling us this specifically, according to the Midrash, to tell us that he had everything, not just a son, but also a daughter who happened to be named Kol. So let's go back here for a moment.
Doesn't it also signify that he completed the halacha of
yeah, that's exactly what I'm suggesting. Right, that's exactly what I'm saying. But he goes farther than this. The Ramban. He says, rather, they introduced a very deep idea, and based on it, they expounded one of the secret mysteries of the Torah. They taught that Bakol hints to a big idea, which is that God has an attribute that is called all. That's called Kol, because it is the foundation of it all, of everything, of Kol. And Ramban quotes some verses, which I cut out. And he says, this is the 8th attribute of the 13 attributes of God. In other words, that there is a deep idea here, that when it says that Avram was blessed Bakol, it ties into the 8th attribute of the 13 attributes of God. Well, what are the 13 attributes of God? Let's take a look here. I put them here on your paper in box 13. Hashem, right? Kel Rachum v'Chanun, Erech HaPayim Chesed v'Emet, Nutzer Chesed La'afim. Again, we say this a lot over the holidays. These are the 13 attributes of Hashem. Let's count them. Hashem, 1, 2. El Rachum v'Chanun, Erech HaPayim, right? 6. Rav Chesed, 7. The Emet, 8. The 8th attribute of God is truth. Truth is called Kol because human history tells us of countless people and groups who have sacrificed everything that they've had, whether right or wrong, for truth. We know plenty of people who have done that. So throughout history. So what we see here from all this is that not necessarily that Bakol is Avram's daughter, but rather when it says that God blessed Avram Bakol, he blessed him with truth. Kol means truth. He gave him truth, meaning the highest level. All we want to do in life is get to the level of truth. we know that Avram is given the attribute of chesed. Now, chesed, being kind to people, is something that sometimes you can be kind to people and it might not be a good thing. It might not be the right thing for somebody. You can help them out and you can be helping them out in a negative way, but you're still being kind. But Avraham takes his chesed and journeys and uses his chesed to journey towards truth. Yitzchak, for example, is given the attribute of gevura, of self-discipline or strength. He uses that attribute to find himself getting to truth himself. And so since Avram reaches this truth in his own special way, you can argue that truth was, according to the Ramban, the quote-unquote offspring of his kindness. And so maybe that's why it's called his daughter, right? He got to it through his own way, through chesed. And so it's almost like his own child. And so what we see here is that Avram actually has a double role. First, he is the father of all nations, and therefore he has to show humanity at large the way of God. And so let's go back to the Zohar's comments. What are the two levels that exist? There is general knowledge of a supreme being, and the second is a more intimate relationship with that supreme being. Avraham reaches the second level, but notice look how the Malbim explains what is the gift that is given to the children of the Pilagsh, the concubines. Natan matanot, chazal darshu. What does it mean? Shem tumah, the names of impurity. Rot salomar, shenatan davar she'en boi lachziko rak lateta lacherim. He gave him something that can't be held on to, but rather could be passed to others. Because Avram knew kedashem yu tachat ha'marechen u'asarlem hashemot u'mushalim al maracha u'motziam koach min ha'mazal v'ha'kochav. In other words, the Malbim says that the Shem Tumah is the facet of existence which was unfit for Avram himself to hold on to, which is this notion the Zohar says of a dependence on natural forces. Rather, he hands it over to the sons of the concubines who are to be governed by natural forces. But what does he give to Yitzchak? Let's go back here. What is it that he gives to Yitzchak in our pasuk? Vayitein Avram at what? Kol. He gave, when it says that he gave them everything, remember we said, well, how could he have given him everything and still had something left over to give to the concubines, Keturah's children? It doesn't mean when it says Avraham gave kol to Yitzchak, it doesn't mean he gave all of his worldly possessions, but rather he gave him kol. Kol meaning truth. He gave him transcendence over nature and an appreciation of the eminence of God. He gave him the inheritance, our spiritual inheritance, which is kol. That's what he gave him. It's an amazing idea here. And so let's go back to our initial three questions. We asked three questions. One was, if Avram gave everything he had to Yitzchak, then what was left to the other children? The answer is he didn't give everything to Yitzchak. He gave Yitzchak the inheritance of truth. And we said, why do we care about what he gives to the other Pilagshim, to the children of the concubines? We care because they are the other nations of the world. Avraham he passes on to everyone in appreciation that there is a God. They take that with them and they carry it with them. Those other religions, those other tribes, they understand that there is a supreme being. That is the Zohar's first level. It's from nature and something natural. You walk around outside and you see it, he passes it on to them. That's what they have. And it's this notion of truth that is instead passed on, this notion of truth, which is instead passed on to Yitzchak, this idea of kol, the eighth principle, the eighth attribute of God. Now let's go back to our initial two questions for a second. When we talked about swimming, teaching your child to swim, so maybe we can suggest that swimming is really about teaching independence. For instance, you can hold the child in water, but at some point you're going to have to let them go and they're going to have to float on their own. That's the whole idea of why we teach them swimming. Swimming is about independence. Avraham knows that his life is coming to an end. He is trying to teach to his son Yitzchak to be independent, to reach that high level. Lech lecha, go to your own personal space. Be independent, be on your own, Avraham says. That's how you'll be able to reach this high level of truth that I was able to reach in my lifetime. That's what he's trying to give to Yitzchak at the end of his life. And I think even Avram therefore teaches his son Yitzchak to quote unquote swim. And if you want to know what I think we owe our children, Yes, we owe them teaching them Torah and teaching them, helping them get married and supporting them and teaching them a craft, all those things. But what do we really owe them? We owe them the truth. That is all of our inheritance. We're all children of Avraham, and it's our job to teach that and share that with everyone in our community, not just our own biological children, but anyone in our community. We owe people the truth. And that's, I think, the lesson from our Parsha. Yes, Herb. Herb, you're muted.
A parent is not infallible. What if a parent doesn't know the truth? And you can't, maybe you can tell your child, maybe this is not the truth. This is the truth I know, but you have to seek your own truth.
So when I say truth, again, we're talking about the Zohar's notion here that there is two levels. There is knowing that there's a supreme God, and then a specific understanding of God. And that takes a lifetime. It took Avraham a lifetime to achieve it. I think it's rare for us to reach that. But we're supposed to use our strengths the same way that Avraham uses chesed and his kindness to reach this higher level of kol. I'd rather call it kol than truth, because truth, I think, could mean different things. We spend our lifetime trying to get there. And that's what it means to commit to studying Torah. We study Torah not just so we know the laws, but when you better understand God and God's divine plan through studying Torah, you build a relationship with him. And that comes to this idea of understanding God in a very specific, unique way, and not just in the general way, like the Zohar was saying. The rest of the world, they receive that as the Masorah, as their own inheritance and Yerusha from Avraham. He gave them matanot. He gave them shem tumah. They understood the natural order of things, that there's a supreme being. But our Yerusha, our inheritance, our Masorah, our tradition is kol. It's committing our lives to truth. And that's what we owe our children. Okay, well, we'll stop here. And I wish everyone a wonderful day. Hope to see you all tomorrow night for our great Scholar in Residence. And can't wait to see you all soon, hopefully in person as well. Take care, everyone.
Rabbi, good